close your eyes just for a moment. Let the world outside fade into a gentle blur. Listen to the silence around you, a quiet not entirely empty, filled with the soft hum of your own presence. And into that quiet, I invite you to follow a single chilling whisper, a murmur passed from one guarded generation to the next of a secret so potent it was never written in any official record, only etched in the fear of those few who have brushed against its truth. This is a story of something waiting in the deepest dark to the silent engine of unknown purpose, sealed away by the most powerful institution the world has ever known. This is a story of the dangerous device hidden in the Vatican archives. The story begins not with a bang, but with a hushed rumor that moves like a cold draft through the hallowed halls of scholarship and faith. IT speaks of a space within a space that is secret nested inside the world's greatest collection of secrets. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, a universe of paper and parchment, a 60-mile labyrinth of human history, containing everything from the petitions of kings to the private tears of popes. But some who walk the hushed corridors speak of a different kind of knowledge. Not words on a page, but an object, a physical thing, mechanical and cold, resting in a darkness so profound it seems to swallow even the concept of time. This whisper suggests that among the endless shelves, among the chronicles of heresy and revelation, of wars and miracles, there exists a separate truth, the truth made not of ink, but of brass and iron and something unnameable. It is a tale passed in fragments, a puzzle no single person holds all the pieces to, because to know the whole picture is to carry a burden too heavy for the soul. The atmosphere is not one excited conspiracy, but a profound, centuries-old silence, a silence that feels less like an absence of sound and more like a held breath. IT is the quiet of a door that must never be unlocked, of a weight that must never be lifted. To understand why, we must first understand a fortress built to contain it. We must journey back to the very birth of the archive itself. In this quiet moment, to comprehend the depth of the secret, one must first wander the genesis of its vault. The Vatican archives were not born in a single moment, but grew like a coral reef, layer upon layer of bureaucracy and devotion, each stratum burying the one beneath. Their formal inception is often traced to 1612, when Pope Paul V ordered the centralization of the Holy See's scattered documents. But the instinct to gather, to control, to sequester knowledge is as old as the Church itself. Imagine the early centuries scrolls from persecuted congregations hidden in catacombs, fragile papyri bearing the signatures of martyrs, theological debates etched onto vellum that could crack like bone. These were not merely records, they were the physical nerves of a living faith. As the Church's temporal power swelled, so did its paperwork. Treaties, land deeds, judicial proceedings, the intimate correspondence of pontiffs wrestling with God and man. The archive became the Church's memory, and like any memory, it contained things too painful, too dangerous, or too confusing to examine in the light of day. From its very foundation, a system of classification emerged. There were documents for the learned, for the trusted, for the elite within the elite, and then there were the others, items marked with cryptic sigils locked in armaria secreta, secret cupboards, accessible only by a direct papal mandate that was almost never given. This was not simply administrative order. IT was a theological and political necessity. The Church understood that some knowledge is a solvent capable of dissolving the mortar belief of destabilizing empires. The archive, therefore, evolved not just as a library, but as a filtration system that IT decided what history was and what was not allowed to be. Its immense, majestic bulk, a monument of transparency for those on the outside, became, within its own heart, the perfect camouflage, a single forbidden leaf lost in a forest of a million legitimate ones, a single dangerous idea given physical form, walled up in a citadel of words, where no one would think to look for anything but more words. This architectural and philosophical context is the womb of our mystery. IT created an environment where something profoundly anomalous could be placed and then made to disappear, not through destruction, but through immense, overwhelming context. The archive didn't just hide a secret. It became the secret's guardian. Its vast, respectable face to mask the silent, watchful thing in its basement. Once again, within this fortress of vellum, the first faint echoes of our mystery appear. They are not proclamations, but tremors. A researcher, centuries ago, tracing a line of papal expenditure, notices an anomalous entry from the late 15th century, the substantial disbursement to a fabrica di metalli speciali, for materials not listed. Brass of an unusual alloy, quartz crystals of specified purity, large quantities of mercury sealed in iron flasks. The ledger notes the order was authorized directly by the Chamberlain, bypassing all usual channels, and the destination is simply the secured workshop. The entry is a dead end. Another scholar, decades later, finds a brittle letter from a Swiss guard captain to his uncle, dated 1527, the year of the sack of Rome. Amidst the chaos of looting and fire, the captain writes of a specific, strange directive. His unit was pulled from defending the Ponte Sant'Angelo and ordered instead to a nondescript monastic complex near the Tiber. Their duty was not to protect people or relics, but a single, heavy crate recently transported from the Vatican cellars. The captain describes it as a chest of black iron, sealed with 7 locks of strange design that hummed faintly like a beehive within a sound that unsettled the horses. His orders were absolute. Let all else burn, this container must not fall into enemy hands. Then there's the most tantalizing fragment, a memo from the Papal Secretary of State in 1666. A single line buried in a report on heresy in the Spanish court. It reads, regarding the question of mechanical anomaly from the previous pontificate, His Holiness has decreed that all discussion shall cease. It is not a matter for theology, but for perpetual custody. To speak of it is to invite confusion of the highest order. These are the whispers that a peculiar purchase, a soldier's bewilderment, an administrative edict of silence. None describe the thing itself. Instead, they describe a reaction to it, a pattern of behavior from the highest authorities, allocate resources, provide extreme security, and then impose absolute silence. The message woven between these faded lines is clear. Something existed that generated not curiosity, but fear. Not wonder, but a deep institutional dread. It was not to be understood, only contained. And these scattered, accidental references are merely the echoes of that dread, slipping through the seams of a centuries-old vow of silence. And now. So what is it at the center of the silence? The whisper consolidates into a shape, though its edges remain blurred by fear and time. It is referred to in the scant few oblique references as the Mechanica Arcana, the hidden engine, or sometimes the Speculum Inanis, the mirror of the void. Descriptions, filtered through layers of hearsay and allegory, suggest a device of considerable size, perhaps the dimensions of a grand piano, but far heavier, constructed from metals that do not tarnish. Its surface is said to be covered not in religious iconography, but in intricate geometric patterns. Interlocking circles, spirals that follow no known mathematical sequence, and glyphs that resemble language but from no identifiable tongue. Some accounts mention crystalline components housed within its metallic frame. Prisms that capture no light but seem to hold a darkness of their own. It is said to possess moving parts, not simple gears like a clock, but concentric rings that rotate independently, and articulated arms that fold in upon themselves in impossible configurations, suggesting a function that is not linear but dimensional. The most consistent and most unsettling detail is that it is completely inert and crank, no wind-up key, no apparent power source or input. It is a machine with no visible means of operation, which implies its activation is either so simple it is invisible or so complex it is beyond contemporary or even modern understanding. Its alleged purpose is where history dissolves into nightmare. It was not a calculator, not a planetarium, not an engine of war. The persistent rumor, the one that generates the deepest theological terror, is that the device does not manipulate matter, but perception, that it is not a tool for doing, but for seeing or unseeing. Its origins are a vacuum. IT does not fit the technological trajectory of the Renaissance, nor the alchemical pursuits of the medieval era. IT is an artifact without a pedigree to creation that seems to have fallen into history fully formed, the splinter of an unknown future or an unknown past lodged in the heart of the Renaissance. It is an impossibility that exists, and that existence posed, and perhaps still poses, a question so fundamental it threatened to unhinge the world. Then if such a device exists, who built it? The archive, which meticulously records the benefactions of minor nobles, holds no patent, no blueprint signed by a proud inventor. This absence is louder than any proclamation. The silence around the machine's creators is not an accident timed. IT is a deliberate erasure. Scattered clues point to a shadowy consortium, not of heretics, but of brilliant orthodox minds, operating under the highest possible sanction. There is talk of forgotten papal commission convened in the late 1400s, a gathering of Europe's most radical thinkers, pulled from monasteries and universities. Not just theologians, but natural philosophers, masters of geometry, experts in optics and metallurgy. Men like Giovanni Fontana, an engineer known for cryptic designs of magical lanterns and automata, or the enigmatic Paolo Toscanelli, whose maps guided Columbus and who was obsessed with cosmic harmony. The group was allegedly led by a Cistercian abbot, a man whose name has vanished from all official rolls, referred to in one suppressed letter only as Il Progetista, the designer. This cabal was not working against the church, but for it. Commissioned by a pope grappling with the shock of the new world and the cracking of the old cosmic order, their mandate was audacious, to seek a physical understanding of divine harmony. T.O. built a mechanism that could model, or perhaps even interface with, the architecture of creation itself. They were to peer behind the curtain. But according to the fractured legend, they succeeded too well. What they brought back from that intellectual frontier was not a philosophical treatise, but a physical object, and upon its presentation, the jubilation turned to horror. The creators, once celebrated, were quietly dispersed. Their published works were recalled or annotated with condemnations. Their names were scrubbed from correspondence, their portraits removed from communal halls. They became non-persons, their life's work reduced to a single, terrifying artifact that bore no signature. Their legacy was not a revolution in knowledge, but a warning sealed in a vault. They were not punished as criminals, they were unmade as historical entities. Their genius becoming a ghost that haunts only the deepest stacks of the archive. They built a bridge to an impossible shore, and the institution that sent them burned the bridge and denied the shore ever existed. In this quiet moment, the machine itself is one mystery. The instructions for its making are another order of enigma entirely. Rumors persist of the schematic, a single vellum sheet locked in a separate location from the device itself, a classic security measure, divide and conceal. This is not a blueprint as we understand it. Those who claim to have glimpsed fragments speak in riddles. The diagram is said to be a riot of lines and curves that defy Euclidean geometry. Depicting the device from multiple, impossible perspectives simultaneously, AS is showing its interior and exterior at the same time. The parts are labeled not with numbers, but with musical notation and astrological symbols, in a bizarre, integrated code. There are annotations in a tight, precise hand, but the language is a polyglot nightmare. Latin roots spliced with Arabic mathematical terms, and strings of what appear to be fabricated, phonic words. The paper itself is allegedly treated with an unknown chemical, giving it a waxy, durable feel and preventing any degradation. Most chilling are the marginalia, notes added by later custodians. Point 1. In a 17th century script, reads, "The ratios here do not describe function, but resonance. IT is not a machine to be operated, but a key to be sounded." Another, from a trembling hand in the 19th century, simply states, "Tested the 7 configuration. The chamber grew cold. The air tasted of metal that we heard. Voices that were not ours. Do not attempt again." The schematic, if it exists, is less an engineering guide and more of a metaphysical map. IT does not explain how to assemble the device. The implication is it arrived assembled, but it might hint at its states or modes of interaction. Studying it would not grant the power to build a new one, but perhaps the catastrophic knowledge of how to wake the one that sleeps. The IT represents knowledge that is actively dangerous to possess, not because it is complex, but because to comprehend its logic is to begin to think in a way that human minds were perhaps not meant to. The blueprint is a locked door, and the writing on it is less an instruction manual and more a series of increasingly frantic warnings scratched onto the door by those who tried to handle and regretted it. Once again, the defining moment in the device's hidden history is believed to be a papal decree, not from a minor pontiff, but from one of the most formidable figures of the Counter-Reformation, Pope Sixtus V. In the late 1580s, during his furious campaign to rebuild Rome, Sixtus turned his relentless attention to the archive's deepest holdings. A famously pragmatic and ruthless man, he had no patience for mystical ambiguities. The story, drawn from second-hand accounts, suggests Sixtus demanded a demonstration. He was a man of action if this mechanical curiosity consumed resources and required such secrecy. He would see its function for himself. The device was reportedly moved under heavy guard to a sealed chamber beneath the Vatican gardens. What transpired there is unknown, but the outcome is etched into the subsequent policy. The demonstration lasted less than an hour. Witnesses described the Pope emerging alone, his face ashen, his usual vigor replaced by a profound, unsettling stillness. He dismissed all guards and technicians with a wave of his hand. That same night, he issued a motu proprio to a personal, sovereign decree that bypassed all existing curial departments. The document, whose full text has never been leaked, contained a single, unambiguous order regarding the Mechanica Arcana. It was to be sealed in a permanent vault, the entrance to be bricked over, and all knowledge of its location excised from every index and catalog. Furthermore, he forbade any future pope or commission from ever attempting to study or activate again, under pain of excommunication. This was not a decision based on theological debate. IT was a reaction of a supremely confident man who had encountered something that shattered his confidence. Sixtus V, who moved obelisks and reformed finances, who faced down kings and heretics, had looked upon this machine and seen something that demanded not utilization but absolute burial. His decree transformed the device's status from a classified project to a forbidden relic. IT was no longer a subject for study. It was a threat for containment. The most powerful man in Christendom had met a power he could not control, and the solution was to erase it from the world's memory. If not from its reality, then where does one hide a secret that cannot be destroyed? You bury it beneath a mountain of other secrets. Deep below the main reading rooms of the Vatican archives lies a place that officially does not exist. The Archivum Arcanum, or sometimes referred in whispers as Isle of Velo 0.level 0. Access is not a matter of clearance, but of lineage. There is no electronic lock, no biometric scanner. Entry is granted by a physical key, of which only 3 are said to exist, held by the archivist, the Cardinal Secretary of State, and the Pope himself. The key operates a lift with a single unmarked button, or perhaps opens a door disguised as a section of movable shelving. The descent is slow, the machinery old and silent. The air changes, growing cooler, drier, utterly still. This is not a curated archive, but a tomb for knowledge. The space is described as a circular chamber with a vaulted brick ceiling, lined not with elegant wooden cabinets, but with identical, featureless iron doors set into the wall, each bearing only a Roman numeral. The device is rumored to be behind one of these, but the numbering system is non-sequential, designed to confuse. The room is lit by a single dim electric bulb added in the modern era, but its light seems feeble against the accumulated darkness of centuries. There are no chairs, no tables. This is not a place for study. IT is a place for deposit and retreat. The floor is bare stone, worn smooth by the footsteps of the few who have ever entered to check the seals. The atmosphere is one of profound negation, a space designed to discourage curiosity. to instill a sense of trespass against time itself. Some who claim to have been there speak of a low, subauditory hum that a vibration felt in the bones more than heard by the ears, though they cannot pinpoint its source. It is a perfect prison, located at the heart of one of the most famous buildings on Earth. Yet more isolated than any remote island, IT is a silent core around which the vast, noisy organism of the church unknowingly revolves, a dark root feeding up into the light, with a dormant metallic seed at its tip. And now, in the 20th and 21st centuries, the legend did not die. IT merely adapted to new kinds of witnesses. The age of the scholar-priest gave way to the age of the technical consultant. In the 1980s, during climate control upgrade, an Austrian engineering firm was brought in to assess the foundations. One of the junior engineers, decades later in a retirement interview, spoke of an anomaly. His team was mapping sub-basements when their sonar equipment detected a void of perfect geometry, roughly 20 meters below the Cortile della Pigna. When they requested archival maps to understand the obstruction, their Vatican liaison, a Monsignor, politely but firmly denied the request and redirected their work. The void was never mentioned again. In 1998, a Swiss guard on a routine solitary patrol reported seeing a soft, pulsing blue light emanating from a grated ventilation shaft at ground level. He investigated, but found the grate securely locked from within. As he watched, the light faded and did not return. His report was taken by his commander, and he was transferred to a different post the following week. The most compelling account comes from a freelance archivist hired in 2012. She worked in secure corral for months. One evening, working late, she needed a specific volume from a restricted section. A friendly cleric offered to escort her. Taking a wrong turn in the labyrinthine corridors, they ended up in a sterile, modern-looking antechamber she had never seen. Through a thick pane of glass and a heavy door, she glimpsed a larger room. IT was not filled with books. In the center, under a shroud of gray canvas, was a large, angular object. She described its shape as wrong, not quite square, not quite oval, with protrusions that made the cover 10 over them. Before she could process it, her escort gently took her arm, his face pale. "You are not here," he said softly, and led her away. She completed her contract, but never received another. These glimpses are the modern texture of the old fear. They are not proofs, but encounters with the mechanism of secrecy itself. The redirected query, the sudden transfer, the polite, firm hand on the arm. They confirm that the silence is not a relic of the past, but an active, ongoing policy. The machine may sleep, but the system built to guard it is very much awake. Then, to place the device in context is to invite bewilderment. Compared to the known technological peaks of the eras it supposedly hails from, Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks reveal genius, but a genius rooted in observable nature. The flight of birds, the flow of water, the mechanics of the human body. His machines, however visionary, are extrapolations from a visible world. The Mechanica Arcana, by description, bears no relationship to this. That IT does not mimic life. It seems to defy category. The intricate clockwork automata of the Renaissance, like the famous mechanical monk that walks and prays, are exercises in devotional mimicry. They are beautiful, complex, but ultimately predictable in their purpose. Our rumored device has no such representational function. Alchemical equipment, retorts, furnaces, alembics are tools for transformation of matter, following the Hermetic principles of as above, so below. But the device is not described as a vessel or a tool. It is described as a self-contained apparatus, an end in itself. The Antikythera mechanism, that ancient Greek astronomical computer, is a marvel of gear prediction. Modeling the motions of the heavens, IT is a calculator. The Vatican device, if the theories hold, is not a calculator of phenomena, but an influencer of them. This is a core contradiction that makes it so terrifying to historians of technology. IT does not fit on the timeline. IT exhibits a design philosophy that seems to leap over the Industrial Revolution entirely, skipping the age of steam and steel to hint at something from the age of quantum mechanics or beyond. Its alleged use of crystalline components, its focus on resonance and nonlinear operation, sound less like Renaissance engineering and more like speculative physics. Was it the result of a mind or minds that somehow access a paradigm of knowledge centuries ahead of schedule? Or does it represent a different, lost trajectory of science, one not based on materialism and reductionism, but on a holistic and perhaps perilous understanding of reality's underlying fabric? It stands as a silent rebuke to our neat narrative of progress, suggesting that the path of knowledge is not a straight line, but a forest with dark, unexplored gullies, where strange things can grow and where some of those things once found are best left to rot in the shadows. A quiet breath passes. The decision to seal the device was not made in a vacuum. IT was a culmination of a series of terrifying events, fragments of which have seeped out like a stain through the pages of private journals. In the mid-16th century, before Sixtus V's fateful decree, a series of controlled tests were allegedly conducted at a panel of trusted theologians and natural philosophers under the strictest vows of secrecy attempted to interact with the machine. They were not trying to dismantle it, but to provoke a response. Using the forbidden schematic as a vague guide, they manipulated its external rings into specific alignments, corresponding to astrological epochs or theoretical harmonic ratios. The results were recorded in fragmented notes were catastrophic in a subtle, slowly eroding way. In one experiment, all candles in the sealed chamber extinguished simultaneously, though no draft was detected. Yet the participants reported seeing each other with perfect clarity as if by a light source with no origin. They also all heard the same distinct melody, a tune none recognized, that seemed to originate inside their own skulls. In another, more severe test, the temperature in the room plummeted, and a fine, metallic frost formed on every surface, except the device itself. 2 of the attending priests later suffered a complete and permanent aphasia, losing the ability to speak or comprehend any language, as if the part of their mind that processed symbol and sound had been surgically removed. The final recorded experiment was, alas, the senior cardinal present ordered the rings to be set to a configuration hinted at in the schematics as the listening post. What happened next is described in a single, hysterical line in a later custodian summary. It opened a window where there was no wall and something looked in. That entry ends abruptly. All participants were placed under a lifelong, solitary retreat in isolated monasteries. The experiment ceased. These were not explosions or conflagrations. They were violations of natural law and personal sanity. The machine did not break the world. It bent IT. IT demonstrated a casual, terrifying power to rewrite local reality, to tamper with perception, consciousness, and perhaps the very fabric of causality. The church guardian of a spiritual reality found itself facing a machine that could manipulate the stage upon which that reality played out. The danger was not annihilation, but distortion. Not the end of the world, but its unraveling. Once again, so what is its theorized function? The whispers branch into dark, speculative territories. The most prevalent theory is temporal manipulation. Not a time machine in conventional sense, but a device that can thin the barrier between then and now. The voices heard, the windows seen, could be bleed through from other moments that a resonant harmonic cracking the lens of the present. Another school of thought suggests it manipulates information itself out of a proto-quantum computer that doesn't calculate, but directly influences probability fields, making the unlikely certain or erasing events from local causality. Hence the aphasia language, a structured information system, simply unravel for those too close. A more theological interpretation posits it interacts with what scholastics call the evum, the dimension of angelic or spiritual beings, the realm between time and eternity. The device, in this view, is a faulty receiver at a broken radio that randomly tunes into channels, broadcasting from this intermediary plane, with chaotic and terrifying results for mortal minds not designed to process that signal. Then there's a most disturbing hypothesis, drawn from the mirror of the void name, that it doesn't create or channel anything at all. Instead, it negates that IT is a localized entropy engine, a focus that amplifies the inherent tendency of systems toward disorder. It doesn't generate cold. It removes the concept of heat. IT doesn't produce voices. It strips away the mental filters that keep other layers of perceptual noise to be a wide. IT is a machine that, when active, punches a temporary hole into the fundamental stillness that underlies creation. IT doesn't show you something else. It shows you the nothing that everything is built upon. This would explain the profound existential terror it invoked that a weapon can destroy a city, that a plague can kill a population. But a device that can even briefly reveal the utter, meaningless void behind the stage set reality, that could destroy faith, purpose, and sanity itself. It wouldn't conquer the world. It would render the world a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And that is a threat against which no army, no theology can possibly defend. And now, security is never perfect. Vigilance must face the randomness of chance. The most significant modern breach occurred not through espionage, but through water. In the winter of 1931, a burst pipe in an upper-level restoration lab sent a torrent cascading down to the archive's floors. The floodwaters found their way into forgotten ducts and channels, eventually seeping into the Archivum Arcanum. The silent alarm was not electronic, but human. The custodian, on a routine monthly check, found an inch of standing water on the stone floor, lapping against the sealed iron doors. Panic ensued. A special team was assembled under the cover of a structural repair detail. When they managed to open a compromised vault, the one rumored to hold the device, they found the chamber secure, but the outer seal damaged. The decision was made for a full, if hurried, inspection to ensure the artifact was unharmed. It was during this operation that a young, recently ordained priest assisting the team did the unthinkable. As the senior officials were distracted, he was left alone for a moment with the uncovered device. Overcome by curiosity, he would spend his life repenting. He later confessed to having reached out and touched one of the cold, geometric patterns on its surface. He reported no immediate sensation, but that night and for weeks after, he experienced vivid, recurrent dreams, not his own life, but the lives of others. He would wake knowing intimate details of 14th century grain prices in Siena, the taste of a wine drunk in Naples in 1620, the despair of a sailor lost in a storm in 1503, information he had no way of knowing. It was as if his brief contact had temporarily disconnected his own memory and allowed the psychic echoes of countless others, perhaps those who had touched it before him, to flood into his mind. The experience shattered his sense of self. He reported himself, fearing madness or possession. He was quietly sent to a remote contemplative order, where he spent the rest of his days in silent prayer, attempting to reassemble the boundaries of his own identity. The security response was drastic. The flood channel was permanently sealed with concrete. The access protocols were rewritten with paranoid redundancy, and a new, silent rule was instituted. From that day forward, no single person was ever to be alone in the presence of the artifact. The machine had demonstrated, even in its passive state, a passive danger. IT was a collector of moments, a capacitor for human experience. And to touch it was to risk being drowned in the ghostly memories of the dead. In this quiet moment, the history of the device is punctuated not just by events, but by absences. IT is a story told by the voids left behind when people get too close. In the 18th century, Father Alberto Ricci, a brilliant but reckless historian of metallurgy, spent years cross-referencing papal inventories. He published a seemingly innocuous paper on anomalous allocations for precision craftsmanship in the late Quattrocento. Months later, he was abruptly reassigned to a missionary outpost in the remote Philippines. His research notes confiscated, he died of fever within a year. In 1897, Dr. Elsa von Straub, a German physicist invited as a rare female consultant, became obsessed with scattered references to crystalline resonance. She began asking pointed questions about experimental protocols. Her access was revoked. She returned to Berlin, but her promising career soon stalled under mysterious bureaucratic pressures. Her private diaries from that period end with the phrase, "They fear the melody of the world." In the 1970s, Father Thomas Byrne, an archivist with a background in electrical engineering, began creating a private, unofficial database of persistent archival anomalies. He disappeared during a holiday in the Swiss Alps. His body was never found. His modest apartment had been clear of all papers by the time authorities arrived. These are not proof of malice, but they form a pattern as cold as the stone of the secret chamber. The method is consistent, not murder in the night, but professional death. Reassignment to oblivion, the evaporation of credibility, the silent removal of research. Sometimes simply a stalled career and a pervasive sense that one should ask no more questions. The institution protects its secret not with violence, but with the gentle, inexorable machinery of bureaucracy and ecclesiastical discipline. IT does not create martyrs, it creates ghosts, people who simply fade from the narrative of their curiosity, leaving no more trace than a ripple on a dark, deep pond. The message to those on the inside is clear. Your curiosity has limits. Some doors, once noticed, should be treated as if they are not there at all. Then the ultimate question is one of motive. Why keep it? If it is so dangerous, so antithetical to doctrine, why not melt it down, scatter its pieces to the bottom of the sea? The answer lies in the unique nature of the threat and the Church's own self-conception. Destruction is an act of understanding. You must know a thing well enough to be certain you can eliminate it. What if in trying to dismantle a machine you inadvertently activated it? What if its material subjected to extreme heat or force released something worse? The risk of attempted destruction was deemed greater than the risk of perpetual containment. But deeper than this practical fear is a theological and existential one that the Catholic Church is built upon the Incarnation, the belief that God entered into material reality. Matter is therefore sacred, a vessel for grace. This device represents a horrifying perversion of that principle. IT is matter that seems to negate spirit, that a physical object that disrupts the metaphysical order. IT is a form of anti-reliquary. Instead of holding the sanctified remains of a saint, may hold a cancerous pocket of void. To acknowledge its existence publicly would be to admit that within the very heart of Christendom lies an artifact that fundamentally challenges the coherence of creation. IT would give a physical form to doubt. Furthermore, the Church sees itself as a guardian of humanity's soul across time. Its perspective is measured in centuries. From this vantage point, the device is not just a current threat, but a perpetual one that its existence means that at any point in the future, if knowledge of it fell into the wrong hands, a tyrant, a nihilist, a misguided visionary, it could be used to unravel the very fabric of human meaning. The Church's fear, therefore, is not merely institutional self-preservation. IT is a paternalistic, terrifying burden. They fear because they believe they might be the only ones responsible enough, patient enough, and eternal enough to guard it forever. In hiding it, they are not hoarding power. They are quarantining a virus of the absolute. They are sitting on the stopper of a bottle they dare not break, not knowing what is inside, but knowing from bitter, forgotten experience that it is nothing good. And now, who maintains this eternal quarantine? Beyond the formal titles of archivists and cardinals, there is said to be a specific unlisted office, the Custodes Silentii, the guardians of the silence. They are not a religious order with public vows, but a self-perpetuating lineage of caretakers. Membership is by invitation only, passed from one generation to the next, often from uncle to nephew or mentor to protege within the secretarial ranks of the archive. Their training is unique. They are taught not theology or history in conventional sense, but a form of disciplined forgetfulness. They learn protocols for handling the crisis of curiosity, both their own and that of others. They are trained in the history of the experiments, not to understand them, but to internalize the horror of their outcomes as a behavioral deterrent. Their primary duty is cyclical and monotonous. The monthly visual inspection of the vault, conducted always in pairs, check the seals and the environment. They file a one-sentence report. The condition is stable. They are also the cleanup crew for leaks, when a researcher stumbles too close. The custodes are the ones who recommend the gentle, firm interventions, the transfers, the reclassifications, the diplomatic conversations that end lines of inquiry. They are the human equivalent of the silent, climate-controlled vault, a system designed to preserve by maintaining perfect, unchanging stillness. They see themselves not as jailers of a secret, but as shepherds protecting a flock from a wolf they can never see, but whose howl they have heard in the old reports. Theirs is a life of profound, chosen obscurity. They will never be celebrated, published, or promoted to high office. Their reward is the grim satisfaction of a duty performed, of a danger kept at bay for another day, another century. They are the living seal, a brotherhood of silence who looked into the abyss of this mystery and dedicated their lives to ensuring no one else ever has to. Then in 2009, a digital ghost story briefly flickered on the darker corners of the internet. An anonymous blog post, written in awkward but precise English, appeared on a now-defunct site dedicated to ecclesiastical history. The author claimed to be a low-level digital scanner operator, working on a Vatican manuscript preservation project. He wrote, not of seeing the device, but of scanning a damaged folio from a 17th century inventory of items for perpetual custody. Most entries were bland, but one, item #747, was different. It was described as una mechanicum in forma dodecedri distorti ex metallo nigro et cristallo hyalino, ponderus supernaturalis, resonat in presentia cordis homini pulsanis. One mechanical object in the form of a distorted dodecahedron of black metal and hyaline crystal of unnatural weight. IT resonates in the presence of a beating human heart. The blogger claimed he was instructed to delete the scan immediately and to make no backup, but he did, but the description haunted him. The post was live for less than 12 hours before the entire blog vanished. Attempts to trace the poster led to a dead end. The leak, whether genuine or an elaborate hoax, added new, chilling details. The shape, a distorted dodecahedron, a 12-sided form warped, was a new detail, suggesting a geometry that defied perfect Platonic ideals. The unnatural weight implied density beyond its material components. But the most terrifying line was the last. It resonates in the presence of a beating human heart. This suggested a passive, organic trigger. The machine was not just inert, it was listening in some way to life itself. Its dormant state was a form of waiting. IT did not need a key. It needed a heartbeat. This leak, more than any other account, framed the device not as a tool, but as a predator to a silent, geometric spider in a vault, feeling the vibrations of the living world through the stone and resonating softly in the dark when they came near. Once again, beneath the theological and existential fears, other, more terrestrial motives weave through the centuries. The Church is a political entity, a sovereign state. The device, if its rumored powers are even fractionally true, represents the ultimate strategic deterrent and the ultimate liability. In the hands of a Renaissance Pope, it could have been used to terrify rival monarchs, to manifest miracles, to cement power, or to blackmail enemies with the threat of unraveling their reality. But the consistent historical response, secrecy over utilization, suggests the risk of backlash, of losing control of the phenomenon far outweighed any potential gain. IT was too unpredictable to be a weapon. In the modern age, the motives are further complicated by science. What the device holds principles of physics that could revolutionize energy, computation, or medicine. The moral dilemma is staggering. TO release such knowledge could be an act of immense beneficence, ending scarcity and disease, or it could be the end of all stability, granting godlike power to whoever first reverse engineered its function. The Church, sitting on this potential, is in an impossible position that TO shared is to potentially unleash Armageddon. TO destroy. It is to potentially obliterate humanity's salvation. So they wait, they preserve, they choose the path of infinite caution over the gamble of infinite reward or infinite punishment. There is also the motive of identity. For an institution built on revelation, on the belief that God has revealed himself, The existence of a revelation of a different kind, a cold, mechanical, amoral one, is deeply corrosive. It represents a form of knowledge that comes not from faith, not from grace, but from a manipulation of the gears of the universe. That embrace it would be to admit a path to power that bypasses the divine entirely. It is a stone that the builders did not reject, but that they desperately hid, because it did not fit the architecture of their temple, and its presence threatened to bring the whole wall down. In this quiet moment, let us speculate on the end of silence. Imagine a device is one day revealed by a catastrophic breach, a political revolution within the Vatican, or the slow, irresistible pressure of digital age transparency. The scenarios diverge wildly. In one scientist from a global consortium working in a maximum security facility begin cautious analysis. They might uncover principles that unlock clean fusion energy, allow for non-local communication, or heal neurological disorders by resetting brainwave patterns. The device becomes a cornerstone of a new utopia, a gift from the past that saved the future. And the Church is hailed for its wise stewardship. But the other path is darker. The moment it is exposed, it becomes a target. Nations and corporations would wage covert wars to possess it. Terrorists would seek to use it as the ultimate disruptive weapon. Even in peaceful study, a single error could trigger an irreversible event, a localized bubble of no time, trapping a research team in an eternal, repeating second a wave of uninformation that erases specific knowledge from a population, creating mass amnesia, or worse, the accidental amplification of its core function, creating a growing void zone that slowly expands, dissolving causality, meaning, and finally matter itself, like an ink blot spreading on the parchment of reality. Public knowledge of its existence alone could cause panic, a crisis of faith across religions, and a global existential despair. The simple knowledge that such a thing exists could change humanity's view of its place in the cosmos. The revelation would force the Church into a defensive position from which it might never recover. Accused of the greatest cover-up in history, the finding would not be a moment of triumph, but a point of no return. The genie, once out of the bottle, cannot be persuaded back in. The world would have to live with the knowledge that at its heart reality is fragile, and in a vault in Rome, there once lay a key that could break it. Silence stretches for a while, and so we return to the silence, the hush that started our journey. The dangerous device, if it exists, is more than a machine. It is a question made of metal, a question about the limits of human inquiry, the nature of reality, and the terrible burden of knowledge. Its story is not one of adventure, but of restraint. Not a discovery, but a deliberate, courageous getting. It is a testament to the idea that the strongest act of power is not to use a weapon, but to choose not to, that the deepest wisdom might lie in knowing what doors should remain closed. The Vatican, in this telling, is not a villain hoarding a treasure. It is a reluctant custodian, sitting on the shore of an unimaginable ocean, guarding the only seawall against a tide that could drown the world. They keep the watch not for power, but out of fear that is ultimately a form of love for humanity they believe is not ready and may never be ready for such a truth. The final seal, then, is not made of brick or iron. It is made of a choice, renewed by every generation of guardians, by every pope who glances at a report marked condition stable, and asks no further questions. It is the seal of the sacred, terrifying responsibility. And as you open your eyes now, returning to your world of light and sound and certainty, that choice continues. In the dark, under stone and silence, the dangerous device waits, not threatening, not pulsing with power, simply being the splinter of the impossible in the heart of the real. And the great, enduring silence around it is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of a breath being held, a breath that has been held for 500 years for the sake of us all.